From the News Channel 5 Network, this is Sportsline.
Hey there, Titans Talk on your television. Steve Layman here with you. Glad you are here with us on this Monday night. And yes, it is Victory Monday for the Tennessee Titans. Going into Seattle, Lumen Field, the 12th man was back, 68,000 strong, rowdy, as loud as anywhere in the NFL. They were ready to go yesterday. They thought they were ready to cheer on a win. For a while, they thought they were ready to cheer on a blowout win. And then all of a sudden, the Titans come roaring back in the second half. They turn the tables completely. Derrick Henry scores with 29 seconds left in regulation to force overtime. And then Randy Bullock, the guy signed up from the practice squad just last week, the 9th kicker the Titans have tried at an NFL game in just over the past 2 years, drills the game-winning field goal from 36 yards out in OT as the Titans win 33-30. A monumental win because the difference between 0-2 and 1-1 is stark. Historically, the numbers tell you that if you start 0-2, only 11, maybe you can round it up to 12% of teams have been able to overcome that and get to the playoffs. That's not a good number, obviously. Now, the NFL did add a 17th game this season, which gives you a little bit more margin for error there, perhaps. But I think when you look around the league yesterday at what the good teams did, I think the results are very telling, right? Very few teams got to 2-0. Very few teams that you think are good fell to 0-2. There's a lot of 1-1 in the National Football League right now. If you look out there and you look at teams like the Patriots, you look at teams like the Bills, the Titans, the Ravens, the Browns, on and on and on and on down the list in the NFL. Teams that you think are good that lost in week 1. Now, some of them, like Cleveland, played pretty well. They just lost in a very difficult place to play in Kansas City against the Chiefs. Others, like the Titans, laid a total egg in week 1. It was like they thought there were still 4 preseason games. But in both cases, they come back in week 2 and they find a way to win. They find a way to get to 1-1. And then you've got some other teams like Pittsburgh had an incredible win in week 1. Kansas City had that win over the Browns in week 1, but had challenges again in week 2, and they weren't able to get over the hump. There's a lot of parity in the National Football League, and it is difficult to win week in and week out. But one thing that is sort of historically played out is that if you're good, you don't start 0-2. You just don't. You either win game 1, or if you lose game 1, you find a way to win game 2. And that's what was on the line for the Titans yesterday. Because make no mistake, the Cardinals are good. They're 2-0. That offense is legit. The Seahawks are good. They're going to win a lot of games. And that is a monumentally difficult place to play in Seattle. And the Titans heard all the naysayers all week talk about how bad they were against Arizona and how bad they were going to get beat in Seattle. And they just went up there and played. And even though they got down in the first half and the defense looked bad again and there were blown assignments and blown coverages, and Seattle put up 24 points in the first half, and you're down by double digits again, they just stuck with the game plan. There was adversity all over the place. You had injuries pregame. Taylor Lewan didn't play. Roger Saffold got hurt during the game. And the Titans just stuck with it. And that's huge because when you stick with the game plan and you're the Titans, that means you're handing the ball to one of the best players in the entire NFL. And yesterday was another legendary type performance from Derrick Henry. 182 yards on 35 carries. He also had the most receptions he's ever had in his career. He had more than 230 total yards in the game as the Titans racked up basically 500 yards of offense. It was a very, very good performance, and it started with number 22. He had 3 rushing touchdowns in the second half, including that game-tying score with 29 seconds left. The Titans stayed the course, and the defense found enough plays. There's a lot they're going to want back. You definitely want to stop the X-plays, those big home run hitters that have hurt this team so much in the first 2 weeks, just like it hurt them last year. You've got to eliminate that stuff. But when the pressure was on in the second half and they needed stops, they got them. Seattle got just 6 points after halftime, and the Titans allowed only 1 first down in the Seahawks' last 4 possessions of the game. Final 3 of the fourth quarter, and their only drive in overtime. And that first down was pretty worthless because it came in the final drive of regulation with clock expiring, and the Titans essentially in a prevent defense and Russell Wilson scrambling for the first down. So the actual Seahawks offense in regular form didn't do anything for the last quarter and a half against the Titans defense. That's the type of performance you have to have, especially when you're down, to allow your offense the chance to get back in the game. And that's what the Titans defense did yesterday. But it was the type of game where you find out who you are. Mike Vrabel said it at halftime. He said, this is what we find out what we're made of, what our identity is. We've talked a lot about it. We preach it around here, but at some point it's not good enough to just talk about it. You got to go out and do it. And yesterday, for the first time this season, in the second half of that game, the Titans went out and did it. And they did it in all the phases. They ran the football, despite injuries up front on the offensive line. Derrick Henry, workload, who cares? He's going to keep on coming at you. Ryan Tannehill bounced back from the 3 turnovers in week 1. He bounced back from a fumble early yesterday. There was a real dagger in the first half of that game. Throws for 347 yards. Julio Jones criticized for his performance in week 1. Comes back yesterday. First 100-yard receiving game as a Titan. 6 catches, 128 yards. Other guys stepped up. Michael Pruitt, Jeremy McNichols, Chester Rogers. Those guys had big plays for the offense. And then the defense stepping up the way we talked about, where it shut the Seahawks down in the fourth quarter and in overtime. And then, of course, special teams. Brett Kern, you know what you're expecting. But the kicking game for this team for the last 2+ years has been an epic disaster. They've had 9 different guys kicking games. They've had 2 other guys on the roster trying to kick for the Titans. And here comes Randy Bullock with his 7th NFL team and steps up yesterday and he knocks in 4 field goals, including that game winner in OT. Now, does that mean he'll be the answer forevermore? I don't know. But yesterday was certainly a good start for Randy Bullock, and his kick helped this team get to 2-0. It was a complimentary effort in the second half. Maybe not for the entire game, but it was a complimentary effort in the second half, and it was good enough to come back and beat a good team in a hostile environment and get to 1-1. And the Titans have to get better. They're going to have to get a lot better as this season moves along. But yesterday was a big step in doing what they preach and actually backing it up on the field. That, I think, is huge for this team moving forward, because you're going to get more healthy than I think you were yesterday. A.J. Brown's going to play better than he did yesterday. He joked on Twitter after the game that he couldn't have caught COVID. That's how many drops he had. He had 4 dropped passes yesterday in the game. That's unlike A.J. Brown. You're going to get him going opposite Julio Jones, playing like he played yesterday one of these days. And then good luck if you're a defense. And you're going to be doing that while Derrick Henry's running for 150 yards. And if the defense can just do what it did in the second half, again, doesn't have to be dominant. Doesn't have to come up with 5 or 6 sacks a la Arizona in week 1. Doesn't have to come up with a ton of turnovers. It just has to find a way to get itself off the field. Get that ball back to the offense. Keep them in the game. Keep the game plan available to run through Derrick Henry. And this team's going to win a lot of games. And you saw that recipe in the second half yesterday, and it definitely worked. What was your impression of the game yesterday? How the Titans went to Seattle and shut up the 12th man and walked out of there with a win in come-from-behind fashion. 737-7767 is the number, and we welcome your calls here on Titans Talk. And we will go to the phones now and say hello to Nate. Nate, good evening. You're first up tonight on Titans Talk. How are you?
How's it going?
Good.
Yeah, it was a big win yesterday, man. I was finna turn the channel, you know. I'm glad I didn't. But, yeah, a couple things that, it's always like, I don't know where people get this notion that Derrick Henry can't catch the ball. I remember a couple years ago, he took a screen pass like 90-something yards. I don't know where people get that notion. And another thing I got, what really concerned me is, man, them hits that the quarterback taking. I'm going to tell you, man, he's not going to be able to take too many more of them hits like he's been taking, man. We're going to be dealing with a backup situation, and that was a good win, man. And I think we're in good shape in the division. The Colts are 0-2, and thanks for taking my call, man.
Yeah, Nate, good stuff there. Yeah, Colts are 0-2, and we find out today Carson Wentz, who left the game yesterday in Indy's loss to the Rams with two, not one, but two sprained ankles. So we'll see what his availability is this weekend here in Nashville. Jacob Eason is the backup there. That is not a good situation for the Colts. So, yeah, the Titans have to like their position in the division. We've thought that all along. The question is, can they take their game to the next level, regardless of what the teams around them in the division do, because they ultimately want to compete for the AFC Championship and get back to that elusive Super Bowl and try to win the crown. So that's the step they're trying to take. But, yeah, they look good in the division right now. Nate brings up a good point about the number of hits on Ryan Tannehill. Too many. 6 sacks in week 1. He hit the turf a bunch yesterday. You had a couple of those roughing the passers that aren't even sacks. But you end up having to deal with that and the accumulation of the hits there. That is something to be concerned about with the Titans moving forward. They have to shore up that pass protection for sure. I do think with this Titans team that they're going to continue to get better on the offensive side of the ball as all these pieces pull together. Don't forget, Todd Downing, new offensive coordinator, calling plays for this group of guys for the first time. Didn't have Tannehill, didn't have Henry, didn't have Jones, didn't have Brown in the preseason. So he's trying to pull all that together now in the first couple of weeks of the season. I expect that unit just to get better and better as the season goes along. And that's kind of been the track record around here, right? That the offense finds its stride as Henry really starts to plow down on people in the second half of the season. That's what you want to see. You want to see steady improvement as they keep going. So, big win for the Titans yesterday, no question about it. Back to the phones we go. Say hello to Gordon. Gordon, good evening. Welcome to Titans Talk.
Thanks, Steve. I called in last week and vented my frustration with the team, and I think it's only fair to praise the team when they do well. I got to say that I didn't give the Titans half a chance to beat Seattle in their own home. And after that first half, I don't think I gave them a quarter of a chance. But they really came together on both sides of the ball. And I hope that this is an indication of better things to come. One thing I'm going to ask you after I finish whatever else I'm thinking of saying, but is what do you think happened in the locker room to turn that around in the second half? And is that something that they can use to build going forward? The one thing I was going to say was, Ryan Tannehill is usually one excellent long field, downfield passer, and yesterday he was not that accurate on the long ball. He was overthrowing his receivers quite a bit, and I was wondering why that would have been, because he's been pretty impressive usually with the long ball. Anyway, I'll hang up and let you say what you have to say.
Yeah, thanks, Gordon, for the call. I honestly didn't notice the long ball struggles yesterday for Tannehill. He had one early that he had a really good throw to A.J. Brown that A.J. didn't come up with. And he had the bomb late in the first half that went for 51 yards to A.J. Brown that you couldn't have, or I'm sorry, to Julio Jones that you could not have thrown better. So I thought when he had to go downfield yesterday, I thought for the most part he gave his guys opportunities to make catches. Was he perfect on all of them? Did they complete them all? No, but I didn't think he was off necessarily. I think he put balls in situations where he trusted guys to go make a play, and in some cases they did. In some cases they should have, and they didn't. And in other cases they just weren't able to come up with it. But I thought he was largely good. I thought he played well yesterday. I thought he was efficient. 347 yards passing, you will take that whenever you can get that out of your quarterback, especially when there's no interceptions attached to that number of passes. So I thought he did good. I thought he took what the defense gave him as Seattle tried to pressure throughout the course of the game. And to your other question about what happened in the locker room, well, we were there, and we asked the guys pretty much that after the game. And in essence, they said it was a pretty subdued locker room. It was not a real animated, a bunch of guys jumping up and down, talking or yelling, trying to encourage guys. Mike Vrabel spoke, and the message was pretty clear. It was that this team is known for being tough and physical and hard-nosed and being battlers, right? That's what they've prided themselves on ever since Mike Vrabel and really John Robinson before. Since those guys have been in charge of this Titans program, that's what has been their calling card. And Vrabel said, look, we talked about it all off season, we talked about it all preseason and training camp, and we've done it in the past. But we can't talk about it anymore. You either go out and you do it, or it's not your actual identity. And I think that struck home with a lot of guys. And they went out. It's a prideful group. They've been in adverse situations before. They've had success in adverse situations before. They've won on the road before in hostile environments. And they went out in the second half and they played their best football. Now, they're going to have to play that type of football more consistently for 4 quarters as this season moves along. But I think they found something in the second half yesterday. And there is an ability that when you start winning games like that, I think it carries over. I tried to ask Mike about that today when we saw him, about how winning these close types of games the past few years, if it can carry over into the locker room, and how much that matters in a situation like yesterday. And then how winning a game like yesterday carries over. And he said, well, you have to do it every year. You've got to continue to win those types of games to be successful. But I do think there is something to the fact that the core of this team, the Tannehills, the Henrys, the Browns, a lot of that O-line, Kevin Byard, Rashaan Evans, those guys on the defensive side of the ball too, have been in some difficult positions in their careers already, together already, and they've found a way to win those games. That, I think, breeds confidence when you get into it the next time. Now, there's some new guys on this team. It's a different makeup. And so this entire group hasn't done it before, but the core has. And I think when the core has, you've got the leadership that, as Vrabel said today in that answer, he said, nobody panicked. When we got to those late game situations and you're down, from the coaching staff dealing with each other and how we're going to use timeouts and what we're going to do with the clock and what kind of decisions we're going to make about certain play calls or decisions about going for 2, this, that, and the other, they were on the same page. And the players followed that lead, and they executed just how the coaches would want them to do it. There was no panic. There was no worry considering the situation. That comes from the experience. And now that this group has done it, this 53-man roster, I think if it happens again this weekend or 2 weekends from now, there will be the confidence of this experience and maybe the toughest environment in the entire NFL that you can pull from, that now you're confident that you can take that into the next game. That's why I think yesterday was so big. Number one, you just needed the win after the loss in week 1. But number 2, I think it's the way they won. To come back in that fashion on the road in that building and find a way to win that can really pay dividends for this team as they move forward. Let's go back to the phones and say hello to Tony. Tony, good evening and welcome to Titans Talk.
Yes, sir. I just wanted to say, what do you think about the kicker, the Baggett? I mean, he got us some kicks this weekend, and we've been waiting for a while.
Yeah, there's no question about it. Thanks, Tony. Kicker has been the Achilles heel for this team. I think back to a game a couple of years ago where Cairo Santos missed 4 kicks, and the Titans lost a game by 1 possession at home. Those types of things just kill you. And the Titans have had to deal with that kicking issue for quite some time now. We talked about 9 guys now have kicked in games since the start of the 2019 season. That's 2 years and 2 games. They've had 9 different kickers in games. They've had 2 other kickers that they've tried to get through. You know, Sam Ficken being the latest example in the preseason. They thought he was the guy, then he gets hurt. It has been impossible to seemingly lock down that position. And for that reason, I'm not ready to say that Randy Bullock is the answer for the Titans. I'm not going to say that Randy Bullock is the guy just off of yesterday. I mean, we saw him miss his only kick from 40-plus yards yesterday. So can he consistently do it, especially up to 50 yards or to 52, 53 yards where you've got to do it in the NFL? We still have to wait and see on that. But for a first-game effort for a guy who wasn't even on the active roster a week ago, to go into that place and knock through 4 field goals. In the first half, the Titans weren't finishing in the red zone, and Randy Bullock was the offense, knocking through 3 field goals. In the second half, they finished, and he was able to put the extra points up, all of that, and then obviously kick the game winner. It's a good start. As he joked after the game, some of the guys didn't know him in the locker room. Well, they know him now, because he was huge yesterday. He got the game ball, and he deserved it. Might have been the most valuable player, or at least most valuable kicker in the building yesterday. But he's going to have to prove that he can do it over and over and over for this team. Not ready to say that the kicking woes are gone yet, but it was a good sign yesterday, and boy, were those some big kicks. Sneak one more in here. Go to Bonita. Bonita, thanks for the call. Welcome to Titans Talk.
Hey, I just got to have a comment. The Titans were amazing yesterday. I mean, that resilience they have, and that despite the injuries they have, was awesome. And I was wondering, can they continue that with the same team they have? Because they were awesome. In that hostile environment, I couldn't believe it. Was amazing. And just thank you for taking my call.
Absolutely. Bonita, thanks for the call. It was an impressive win, given the environment. And again, I was there. It was loud. And I think it was a little extra jacked because, remember, Seattle didn't allow any fans, not just reduced capacity. They didn't have any fans last year during the COVID 2020 season. It felt like COVID on top of COVID in 2020. But they didn't have any fans, not even for their playoff game. And so the 68,000 plus that were there yesterday, those were the first fans to walk through the Lumen Field doors in 2 years. And I think they saved up all the lung capacity to just scream and yell and have fun and be a part of it yesterday. And they were nuts right up until the end when that kick went through from Randy Bullock. And the Titans shut them up with the way they played. And yes, I do think they can carry that over. And we knew it was going to be a difficult first couple of weeks. I'm not sure if you would have drawn it up or known that the Titans were going to be 1-1, that you would have selected losing at home to Arizona in blowout fashion and then going to Seattle and winning in the way they did there would be the way it would go. But you knew these first couple of games were going to be a test, especially for that defense. Now they get to a part of the schedule where they should be able to make some hay over the next few weeks. This is already a division that is proving to not be very good. The Texans won in week 1 against the Jaguars, but they're 1-1 now. The Colts are 0-2, and we mentioned earlier the Carson Wentz injury issues. The Jaguars are 0-2. and look atrocious. So the Titans are sitting there at 1-1. They are in first place. They have a chance to bury the Colts this weekend with a win at home to go 2 full games up on them just 3 weeks into the season. They look good in the division, but you have 3 games here. Colts at home, at the Jets, at the Jaguars. This is a stretch that if the Titans are as good as I think people have talked about them being, and certainly the way I believe they can play when they're at their best, the Titans need to win all 3 of these games. Indy's beat up. It's home. You got to take care of business there. And then you got to go win those 2 games on the road because you are just flat out better than those teams on paper. And if the Titans can do that, now you're looking at a team that's 4-1 going into that difficult stretch where you got the Bills and then you got the Chiefs back-to-back games there. And you'll find out really where they are in terms of AFC contenders with those games back-to-back. But this 3-game stretch, this is where you make your hay right now. This is where you stretch that lead in the division, really grab a stranglehold of this, and then you start to find out where you fit in the entire conference. But the way the Titans played yesterday, after the first 6 quarters of the year, and look, this is where maybe there is a little bit of you got to temper the excitement, is while it was awesome, it was really awesome from the first drive of the 3rd quarter to Randy Bullock's kick going through the uprights in overtime. It was basically 2.5 quarters of football that was really, really good. Unfortunately, prior to that, there have been 6 pretty average quarters from the Titans. So we need a lot more of what we saw in the second half and less of what we've seen prior to that in the season. But I do think the formula they found there in the second half is something they hope to carry over, not just to Sunday against the Colts, but for the rest of this season. Our phone lines are open, 737-7767. We've got a lot of lines here open for you if you'd like to get in on the conversation. We'd love to talk to you. This is Titans Talk. So much more ahead on a Victory Monday after a big win in Seattle. Stay tuned. You're watching News Channel 5 Plus.